Now, it was clear that in 2022, New York Democrats not only underperformed, but that lackluster showing in that state was largely responsible for handing the House to the Republicans as they flipped 4 seats in one of the most liberal states in the country. But now, those liberals seem to have woken up. According to the New York Times, New York Democrats have announced their support for a statewide effort to pass a women's rights amendment to the state constitution, the benefits of which would be twofold. First, the New York Equal Rights Amendment would explicitly bar New York from using its powers and resources to penalize those who have abortions, and second, it would generate turnout in 2024 by putting one of the most potent issues in the country on the ballot in a state that otherwise doesn't have the electoral pull that a battleground state has. And in case you doubt that potency, bear in mind that since the Dobbs decision was handed down, Democrats have ushered in an electoral routing of Republicans in this country. In the immediate aftermath of Dobbs, the 5 special elections saw an average 9-point swing to the left compared to Biden's 2020 numbers. When Republicans put the issue of abortion on the ballot in ruby red Kansas, voters rejected it by a 20-point margin. And in the 2022 midterms, a year that history swore should be a red wave, Democrats had an unprecedented showing, retaining the Senate and only allowing Republicans a 5-seat margin in the House. There wasn't a single candidate in a battleground state who espoused support for abortion bans that won. And just this year, Democrats won a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin that was largely predicated on abortion by a staggering 10-point margin in that 50-50 state, and they even flipped the mayoral seat in Jacksonville, Florida, which until that point was the largest city still controlled by a Republican. All of which is to say, if you doubt this issue's potency, you probably shouldn't. And let's be clear, Republicans have done nothing to moderate their position. Donald Trump, the leader of the Republican Party, has come out and taken full credit for stacking the court with anti-choice extremists as part of his presidential campaign.
First of all, I'm the one that got rid of Roe v. Wade, and everybody said that was an impossible thing to do. I put on 3 Supreme Court justices. Very few people have had that privilege or honor, and they are terrific people, and they happen to believe that Roe v. Wade should not be there. It's been now brought back to the states. And what I've done is I've given the pro-life people, who are wonderful people and loving people, I've given them the power of negotiation, because now they're able to negotiate something that's going to be very important.
Here's another Republican candidate, Tim Scott, refusing to rule out signing a nationwide abortion ban into law.
Yes, sir. Would you support a federal ban on abortions? I would simply say that the fact of the matter is, when you look at the issue of abortion, one of the challenges that we have, we continue to go to the most restrictive conversations without broadening the scope and taking a look at the fact that I'm 100% pro-life. I never walk away from that. But the truth of the matter is that when you look at the issues on abortion, I start with the very important conversation I had in a banking hearing when I was sitting in my office and listening to Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, talk about increasing the labor force participation rate for African-American women who are in poverty by having abortions. I think we're just having the wrong conversation.
And in Florida, Ron DeSantis saw his state's 12-week abortion ban and decided, in the middle of his presidential campaign, to sign an even more extreme 6-week abortion ban into law, proving that this is an issue the GOP is leaning into as they head into 2024. And by the way, that's a point I made during a recent debate with Trump's former OMB director, Mick Mulvaney.
You're right. A lot of folks are realizing that, okay, Republicans are supporting a 12-week, limit on, I think Mike Pence came out and said he would support a 12-week protection, right, at the federal level. That's Mike Pence. This is the most pro-life person in the world who just took a position that abortion before 12 weeks might be okay. Okay, so it's a debate, and I think that's healthy for us.
Yeah, I mean,
in the long run.
I think that we're kind of kidding ourselves if we pretend that any Republican wouldn't try to pass a federal abortion ban if they could. I mean, the same reason that the same people who told us not to worry that it was already settled law with Roe had then come forward and applauded the Dobbs decision and then moved forward with a 12-week abortion ban, and then we moved and saw another one to a 6-week abortion ban, and then immediately we saw legislation introduced in Congress for a national abortion ban. Yeah. So we pretend that we don't see these issues at our own risk.
You can introduce anything in Congress.
Right. I mean, Ron DeSantis, someone who is on a national stage, who's trying to make himself the next president of the United States, he had a 12-week abortion ban and opted for a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. Right. If that isn't a harbinger of things to come in the Republican Party, I don't know what is. In other words, voters should be well aware that this is a party that has broadcast its intention to enact even more extreme abortion bans, even despite the nationwide pushback. It's a party that does not care about the will of the people, clearly, and the danger in that cannot be overstated. Now, as far as the Equal Rights Amendment is concerned, organizers plan to raise at least $20 million to spend on TV ads, direct mail, and organizing to support the initiative. That would be in addition to the House Democrats' $45 million effort to win 6 New York swing districts in 2024, including the 4 that flipped red in 2022. Democrats may have slept through the midterms, but it looks like they have no intention of sleeping through the general. And so they're not only looking to erase the GOP's gains from 2022, they're looking to actually add seats for themselves. New York Governor Kathy Hochul called the threat to women's reproductive rights, quote, a highly mobilizing force that has proven to win elections in New York. She invoked the New York special election victory for Democrat Pat Ryan over the favored Republican Mark Molinaro, a race that heavily featured the issue of women's reproductive rights. And New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand echoed that sentiment, saying, having a ballot initiative in our state is going to drive voter turnout overall, which will definitely help Democrats. The biggest reason we lost House seats was because of voter turnout. By the way, this isn't the only boon for Democrats in the Empire State. The highest court in New York had a conservative majority until this year, when an appointment by Governor Hochul finally moved the court to the left. That same court will now have the opportunity to hear a case on New York's congressional maps. I spoke with Democratic super lawyer Mark Elias as part of our new YouTube-only voting rights series called Democracy Watch about exactly this issue. Okay, so moving over to New York, Attorney General Tish James and Governor Hochul have both filed an amicus brief in support of a lawsuit that's trying to force New York to redraw its congressional maps rather than leaving those lines in place that were put forward by a court-appointed special master. Will that case come in front of the New York State Supreme Court once Hochul's new nominee is confirmed?
In full disclosure, I am involved in that case as well. My firm brought that lawsuit. And that lawsuit, to put it in a nutshell, basically says that, look, the map that was drawn by a special master chosen by a Republican judge in a rural red county. And that's not a pejorative, that's just a fact. It was a judge, Republican, who is in Steuben County, New York, which is a very rural, very Republican area, one of the most Republican counties of New York. The plaintiffs brought their claim there, presumably for a reason. That map may have needed to be in place for 2022, but that at this point, the Independent Redistricting Commission, which operates in New York, and the legislature of New York should have another opportunity to put forth and pass a map that meets the Constitution of New York, and that this court-appointed map, the court-drawn map, should not bind the state for 10 years. So that case is now before the intermediate court, which in New York is referred to as the appellate division. And that argument is before the intermediate court is on June 8th. And then I would anticipate the case will go to the High Court of New York, which is called the Court of Appeals, where, as you point out, a new Chief Justice of the Court of Appeals has been appointed, as well as a new justice. And that new justice essentially would become the swing vote in likely litigation.
And you don't think that there will be any issues basically looking to change a map mid-decade?
No, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on this in the 1990s when Tom DeLay sought to redraw the Texas map mid-decade. And the Supreme Court has said that there's a minimum of once a decade redistricting, but that's not a limitation. And just to be clear, I wouldn't call this mid-cycle redistricting per se, because it's not that the legislature passed a map and is now passing a new map. The legislature passed a map that was struck down, a court put in place what I would refer to as an interim map, and then the legislature is free to come back and pass a map, obviously eventually subject to court review, but the legislature should be allowed to take another shot at it.
So between having maps in New York that weren't put together by a Republican and having an issue on the ballot that's been proven to supercharge turnout, like protecting reproductive rights, let's hope that New York shows up in a big way in 2024, because this is a state that could single-handedly win back the House. Although I should also note, because of the Supreme Court's recent Milligan decision, we're already assured to see another minority-majority district drawn in Alabama and Louisiana, and we're almost assured to see identical rulings handed down in Georgia and and even Texas, where we're not only talking about one minority-majority district, we could be talking about anywhere from 2 to 5. All of which is to say, between Republican overreach and gerrymandering and Republican overreach on the issue of reproductive rights, there will be a lot of good news for Democrats as we head into 2024. So I know that most of the attention in these elections goes to the battleground states, and rightfully so. Just today, a major pollster identified 4 toss-up states that will likely determine the presidential election: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia. But as we've come to learn, winning the House and Senate are just as important. And so even though the stakes for the presidency aren't too high in states like California and New York, they couldn't be higher when it comes to down-ballot races. All of which is to say, no matter where you live, your vote will never go further than it will next November. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.